Welcome to Ask A Fiduciary. Today, we're talking about how to start a financial plan. So people always ask me, they say, Jordan, how do I start a financial plan? Where do I begin with? And there is a lot to retirement than just starting a financial plan. Once we start it, we got to finish it and go through. Now, for more awesome videos to figure out just how to do that, make sure that you like this video and subscribe and leave a comment below. But today we're talking about how do we start a financial plan. And the first way that I like to do that is figuring out how much money do we need per month for the rest of our lives. So let's use as a very simple example, somebody needs $5,000 a month. Right? So their number is $5,000 a month, right? That's what a lot of people's lifetime or expenses are going to be in retirement. Now, if we're thinking about somebody who's younger, I would not plan on Social Security. If we're thinking about somebody who's maybe 50 years or older, using Social Security built into there, that can be a good idea. But if we think about it for a second, $5,000 a month, that means over the course of a year, 12 months, that means that we need to have $60,000 a year. That's how much income we need to generate from our investments. So one of the things we got to figure out first is, well, what is our critical mass that we need to accumulate? Now keep in mind, this number does not include inflation, it doesn't include taxes, and it doesn't include a long-term care event. This is just to get everybody started with figuring out what that number is for themselves. So if we take 60,000 and we divide that by, let's say 5%, which is the amount of money that we could safely withdraw from and not have to run out of money, that gives us $1.2 million. So as we're starting to put together the pieces of what our retirement needs to look like, that means that we would need to save $1.2 million. Now keep in mind again too, I'm not including taxes, fees, inflation, underperformance. Also, not everybody's plan for retirement is leaving a legacy. Some of your all's plans is I want to spend my last dollar on my last day. I understand that everybody's goals are different. So this number maybe needs to be a little bit more or a little bit less. So the question is then we've got to figure out, well, how much time do I have before I retire? See, if somebody's within 10 years from retirement, the number right here sometimes can be a little overwhelming. Maybe somebody didn't plan as much as they needed to when they were younger and they've got to play catch up. Now there's different ways that you can make it work, especially if you're within 10 years from retirement right now. You've got Social Security, maybe you've got a pension, and you've got your investments. If you're younger, maybe you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and you're like, wow, that's a big number to get to. People underestimate or they overestimate how much they can do in a year. They vastly underestimate how much they can do in decades. People can save lots of money, and if we invest it right, it can grow a lot over long periods of time. So if we're looking at that $1.2 million number, the way I would bucket it is how long do we have before we retire? Are we within 10 years? Are we outside of, let's say, 10 to 15 years? Or are we 15 plus years? Depending on where you are in your cycle for retirement, it's going to largely dictate how aggressive we need to be with adding money to the accounts and how we treat our investments. We always talk about we need to invest based on our age. Well, what does that mean? Let's say somebody has 15 years to go before retirement planning. If we look at stock market cycles, typically, oftentimes every 7 to 10 years, we go through a basically what's called a boom-bust cycle, where the market goes up and it goes down, but the long-term trend is up. We've got two cycles essentially right here if history repeats itself. So if we think about it, in this instance, risk is good, right? Risk is good. It's our friend, not our enemy. We should basically, in an environment like this, if we've got a long ways to go before retirement, we should realistically have most of our money exposed to the stock market. Now, if you're a super conservative investor, not everybody's going to feel comfortable doing that, which I 100% understand. So you don't have to follow that model, but if your goal is to maximize, to build this critical mass right here, the easiest way is to take risk. And the ways that we're able to do that is most of you in this environment have a 401k. Well, the thing about the 401k is picture it as two different investment buckets. We've got the bucket of existing funds that are in the account, and we've got the bucket of money where new monies are going into the plan. See, if we think about it, when you're contributing to a 401k and you're putting money into that on a regular basis, you're taking advantage of the ups and downs in the market. Basically, the volatility or the risk is on your side. So what we want to do is in this environment, we really don't want to have many other investments besides investments that are in the market in this environment because we want to maximize as much as we can over the long period of time. If you look, and Warren Buffett has said it before, if you compare a hedge fund to just a normal S&P 500 index fund over a 100-year period or even a shorter to intermediate term period, the index fund is going to outperform the individual stock. So a great way you can go about doing this is look for low-cost index funds inside your 401k. That's the first way that we can come up with a plan. We figure out what our number is, and then we build and design our portfolio, and the only goal that we've got is how do we build this critical mass as much as we can. The next bracket of ages could be 10 to 15 years from retirement. Now you're starting to get closer. You're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and at this point in time, this is where we want to start to put some safety nets into our portfolio. For those of you who have done a nice job saving in this environment, at this point in the ball game, gains help, but risk also hurts. We need to start taking risk off the table and moving some of our assets towards a more safety net. For a lot of people, they're generally going to be in their 50s at this number right here, maybe early to mid 50s. If you're retiring earlier, you're in your late 40s, or if you're retiring later, you could be in your early 60s. So what we've got to do is we need to figure out how much time do we have before retirement where we can start to scale back some of the risk in our portfolio. Now this one right here is where we want to start to implement what is known as the rule of 100. We talked about this a bunch. If you'd like to watch that video, go ahead and click that button above, and then that'll show you how the rule of 100 works. But if we look at the rule of 100 right here, basically the way it works is you take your age. That's the part of the portfolio that should be in investments that are completely safe and protected. The number 100 minus your age, that's the part where we could take some risk. So if somebody's 50, it's a 50-50 split. If somebody's 40, it's a 40-60 split. If somebody's 60, it's a 60-40 split. This is where we should start to put in safety nets and precautions in our portfolio. Obviously, we should not take all the risk off the table in this environment. You've still potentially got one, maybe 1.5 cycles before you need to retire or access these monies. However, if we had a really long correction and it took potentially 15 years, the longest it's ever taken in history is about 16 years. But if it took 15 years for us to get back to where we're at, we don't necessarily have the luxury of time. That's why we want to hedge our bets with this option right here. I like to start having some money move towards the rule of 100. It doesn't have to be perfect at this point in the ball game because we've still got quite a bit of time. Where the rule of 100 and where safety becomes very, very important is in this guy right here. 10 years, within 10 years from retirement. Risk over here is our friend. Safety over here is our friend. At this point in the ball game right here, a big gain will not help you like a big loss will hurt you. We're trying to hit singles and doubles. We are not going for home runs. We're going from home runs here because if you strike out, you got a lot more game left to play to get yourself out of that hole. This one right here, game's getting very, very close to the final innings. So we need safety right here. We should absolutely make sure that we have a rule of 100 split, or when I say absolutely, what I mean is that we need to start making sure that our portfolio has the proper safety nets set up in place. At this point in time, what we need to do is we need to have an income plan. We need to absolutely make sure that our risk is checked and under control. We need to make sure that we're planning for inflation here, a long-term care event, and rising taxes potentially. We don't know what the future is going to bring. These are three things that always creep up on folks as they're moving into retirement. So if we look at this environment right here, how do we start a plan? We've got to first and foremost figure out what's our number. How much money do we need to have in an investment account to generate income for us for the rest of our lives? Once we know that number, it becomes a lot more simple. We just figure out how far and how long do I have before I retire. Keep in mind again, if you're 15 years or more from retirement, take risk, put as much money as you can into your accounts. I would not check your accounts that much, especially in volatile times like a 2008, a 2000, or a COVID. In this environment right here, 10 to 15 years from retirement, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. This is where we need to start to put some safety nets in place. We do not want to take all the risk off the table. Risk is still helpful for us in this climate, but if we had a really nasty stock market correction, it could be very damaging to our retirement planning. The last bucket that we have right here is if you are within 10 years from retirement, we need to make sure that we are starting to put some safety nets in our portfolio and that we are starting to have an investment plan that looks like a retiree's would, not somebody who has 15 or 20 years left till retirement. So if you think about it, it's very exciting, it's very sexy to pursue portfolios like this because you want to go after the big returns. In this environment right here, while it doesn't sound fun, we want it to be boring. We want it to be plain vanilla ice cream portfolio where there's not a lot of excitement. It's simple, it's consistent, and it's gonna make sure that we have a security bucket in our portfolio in the future. Also, we need to make sure that we've got an income plan. We know we've accumulated our critical mass, but more importantly now, how are we going to generate income from this right here? The next piece is risk. Is our risk under control? Do our goals, does what we actually want in our portfolio, does it line up with what we've got? And when we meet with folks in our office, especially pre-retirees and retirees, the vast majority of the time, someone's goals, it generally does not line up with what they have in their portfolio. And if they'd never met us or somebody like us, that could be very, very negative for the outcome of their retirement. Last piece right here, we need to make sure that we have a plan in place for inflation, long-term care, and taxes. If we start to build a plan like this puts us in a significantly better position to have a successful retirement. Now, if you guys have enjoyed this video just like this, make sure that you subscribe below, leave a comment below, like our video, and then check out more of our Ask A Fiduciary series.